Hello there, Hero Club. I am the editor-in-chief, one of its four founders, Wheelchair 21. You already know that. And today I'm doing another interview. This time it's with another member of Starlight Runner Entertainment. He is actually the current editor-in-chief, and we'll tell you more about that by, I mean, current editor-in-chief of Ultraman Galaxy. He is Steele Filipek. Hello, welcome to this interview.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I am too, especially because when getting a hold of Mr. Gomez, I even told him in the interview with him, I didn't actually expect for a person like me as a startup website to even get as far as I've gotten thus far with certain interviews and certain people, because I'm used to just sending the message, it's saying, we've seen your message, and then no replies after that when it comes to small-time actors, small-time comic writers, and like not even people who made it big yet, but then going to bigger people who've already made it, I guess you would say, tenfold than some of these people, and be like, I'm in. And so, like, I'm very gracious of that moment and whatnot. And
It's just great speak. I actually love speaking with dedicated fans, the people who like the media, because I was that person. I was someone who, reached out to people and people talked back to me, and that was something that I really wanted to do as well. I got lucky that I was able to reach out to mentors, reach out to people who are artists, and they responded back to me. And so I always want to do that kind of stuff. And particularly because it's just an interview. You're not asking me to co-sign your loan. This is great.
all right, so since we are doing this interview, I guess the best way to even start to do this whole thing is actually asking you what actually inspired you to become like a writer and producer, as well as what was the background in your education for all of this.
Yeah. So there are two answers to that question. The first question. The first is that I've always liked telling stories, and I've always liked building story worlds. From when I was a child, I liked drawing, I liked writing, I liked, exploring the imagination. My father was a heavy influence on me. He was a huge fan of cinema, and he showed me many films I probably was too young to see, but that just spurred my imagination even more. And I liked the thought that the world could change based on the stories that we tell. And I still believe that. And that so much data and so many surveys and so much scientific studies have come out to really back that up. What we believe in the world and what we write does have an effect on the way that people interact. So that's number one. And the number two thing is that it was the thing I was good at. And I can't underplay that enough. It was the thing that I was interested in, and it was the thing that I was good at. I really loved playing hockey, and I really loved art, but I was not good enough at either to make a career out of that. And writing was something that I was good enough at, and I liked enough that I could pursue that in a particular fashion. So that led me to apply to a bunch of colleges, but NYU accepted me, and I studied dramatic writing there under a lot of tutors, not the least of which were Cassandra Medley, Lauren Paul Kaplan, and Charlie Rubin, fantastic professors, as well as so many others, Joe Vinciguerra and Joe Kelly, and just innumerable people. And they all had an effect on me. And they all taught me to think with the heart and the mind, to look at structure, but also to be guided by what interested me. And what interested me was storytelling and story structure. And that eventually brought me to Starlight Runner Entertainment. I'd been a writer at that point for a couple of years. I had been working at Showtime, and I got the opportunity to work with them. My first big break with them was working on Halo, principally Halo Reach and Halo 4, doing story world design, doing content design for them. That was a really big break, and it was such a big project that I kind of got thrown into the whirlwind. So there was no chance to second guess. I had to write. I had to do what I thought I could do. There was no time to second guess myself. So there were many forms of education, and the pragmatic education was probably the most effective, actually.
All right. Uh, I guess since you named several people who are also your tutors or teachers and
Yeah.
instructors, what people would you actually cite though for being your influence to work? I guess you would say like who are the ones that you take a lot of influence from when either being a writer yourself or just I guess you would say, dedicate your, I guess, career to, as I accidentally knocked the table.
Happens. So the number one, so the person, so there's several people who continuously inspire me. The number one person in terms of storytelling and story design would have to be Hayao Miyazaki. His works continuously inspire me, and every time I watch them, I get something new out of them. I teach classes on them now. The Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle, back to back to back to back, just four amazing films. If I could make, works of arts that were half as good in my lifetime, I would live a fulfilling life. I would say also that the first artist, the first writer who influenced me, who made me think that I could do something like this, was Kevin Smith. I watched Chasing Amy when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and it was the first movie that I saw where I was just like, the dialogue it just lit a torch under me, and I just mimicked his style for 2 or 3 years after that. Like many artists do, you find someone who inspires you, and you just try to write or draw or do whatever just like them. And eventually you begin to realize, like, what are the elements that you like about those things, and you take that and you add your own voice to it. So for those two people were huge, and also Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, the idea that that you can create theme and that you can create a positive impact on the world, and just by being who you are. Those three individuals were highly influential in my career, and they still manage to inspire me to this day.
All right. That's a lot of good advice, or a lot of good information of insight to your creative background. I agree with some of that for sure, because I grew up also watching Mr. Rogers' Name put on syndication, and while the final episodes were still airing up until, I want to say, my cousin was in the toddler age, so I was watching it with him when I was watching.
I just love Kevin Smith and Mr. Rogers, like, these two.
Two polar opposites in a sense, because one's dropping F-bombs, the other one's telling, "Hey, friend."
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so this is an interesting thing, since I know Starlight Runner goes, throughout all type of media, whether it's video games and it's television, movies, or types of genres. But do you have a particular favorite genre to write for, like whether it be like westerns, fantasy, sci-fi, steampunk, cyberpunk, anything like that? Like, do you have a specific genre?
Yeah, I think so. I love good fantasy, and I love good horror. Not slasher horror. I like cerebral horror. I like cerebral fantasy. I like things that make people think, that make people question the world. And there's nothing wrong with high fantasy, and there's nothing wrong with slasher fiction or slasher horror rather. And but the movies that really inspire me. The Babadook, when I saw that, I really, really liked that movie, and just all kinds of fantasy. I like monstrous in terms of comic book form. Their Bone is another major example. I could have named Jeff Smith as another influential creator in my life. That and Rassel, those Bone and Rassel are just two amazing pieces. But what I find is that when I find those pieces of fiction, they really inspire me to do something better. And when I find things in those genres that I hate, it also inspires me to do something better. Because it inspires me. Like, if they could do that, if someone could make this and get it out there, I could write something that I feel is better, and it pushes me to do more. So those are the two principal things. I really do like science fiction. And I want to write better science fiction, but I don't think that is as good a realm for personal work for me as others. That being said, of course, I've worked on a lot of science fiction. Ultraman, not the least of which, but also Halo, Red Faction, Splinter Cell. If you would count that as science fiction, I would, because it's like near future kind of things.
The more I would believe, like, the more niche recent stuff is what I think the term is, ever since Mystery Science Theater 3000 next Sunday AD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those kind of things, and I still like doing that, but that's also something that I want to aspire for. But those other two genres are things that definitely that definitely inspire me and the things that I like. I will say that my agent is always pushing me to write more romantic comedy because that's where I've gotten most of my work in my career. And I do enjoy romantic comedy, but I enjoy those other genres more.
All right. How did you actually come to learn about, I guess you would say, the term transmedia storytelling, or what it actually is in general, and how do you personally explain it or describe it versus, say, some of your colleagues?
Yeah. So the first time I was introduced to the concept of transmedia storytelling was via Jeff Gomez when he interviewed me for a job at Starlight Runner Entertainment. I knew what it was because I had seen it before via Planet of the Apes and Star Wars and Star Trek, but I wasn't sure what that actually meant. And so he really instilled in me, first of all, he continued my love of structure, which had been impressed upon me by Lauren Paul Kaplan, another one of my mentors. And but he really got into the history of it, going back to ancient storytelling devices and also talking about Japanese storytelling, specifically Keiretsu. And that was where my multimedia transmedia education began. And so if I had to describe transmedia, there is the technical definition, which is the artful and well-planned use of storytelling across multiple media platforms. And that's true. That absolutely works. I also think it is any storytelling that occurs across multiple media platforms. Now it's kind of de rigueur. You see independent comic book publishers who have a Kickstarter page and they've got the digital experience and they've got interviews and they're doing a commentary and they have a Spotify channel and they're doing live events along with other creators, and that's all, that's all multimedia storytelling. Really it comes down to the planning of it so that it's not just a marketing campaign. One of the big things that differentiates it from traditional marketing and branding is the two-way dialogue, that fans can speak to creators and creators can speak to fans. And not just can, but they should. There needs to be a design in there for creators, and it has to come from creators first. The creators have to build that into the structure so that fans don't feel that there is a wall there. Creators don't necessarily need to feel that they have to be beholden to fans, but I think it is to their benefit, and I think it is to the project's benefit if they build that in there so that there is the capability for dialogue. So if there are problems and if there are great things, those can be addressed rather than there being a wall. I think that is something that's critical to me as a creator.
All right, that's actually an interesting take and input about opening a dialogue between creators and, I guess you would say, fans and whatnot, because as I know, there are some horror stories, at least in other countries, where publishers get too much, I guess you would say, fan safe, where they see sales dip, they will force their writers or publishers, or I guess you would say writers room for a TV show, to completely rewrite stories. I think you've heard of like these horror things of like fan mail being sent in. Like that used to happen here in America, but I've heard all these stories regarding, like, at least in mangaka sales, that editors will push stuff if they get too much hate mail or backlash. They'll be like, hey, you shouldn't probably kill off this character that you're probably planning, and they see the foreshadowing for stuff like that. But like I get where you're coming from, because you need to have that certain blend of interaction so is what I'm doing good or is it bad, not just versus I want to get this out there because this is my story 100%, but you should also try to go, I'm writing this to certain people and I want to make sure they feel a little bit of the inclusion, or at least get where I want to go with this and see if what I'm doing is right. So I completely see like that whole story structure, because I see that even now as of today, where people say, oh, you don't take any fan in consideration, or they do, but they do it cold-heartedly or half-heartedly. Like, that is a huge thing right now, I think, in the populace of just being a creator, because I've seen it so many times with television shows. At least now it's getting more and more abundant, like the conflict. I don't know what your take is with that.
Look, it's a balance. As creators, you have to create the art that speaks to your soul. Absolutely. If you're not doing it, you shouldn't be a creator. But there has to be a consideration of the audience. This is something that comes up time and again when I'm working with young creators, when I'm working with young artists. Sometimes they only want to create for a very, very narrow niche of people. And I'm like, that's great. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Just don't expect that narrow niche to be able to fund a $300 million movie. You have to be realistic with who you are reaching out to. And the opposite way around, I'll have young people, students and people who are looking for mentorship, and they will say, well, I want to create a movie. I want to create this thing, and I hope it reaches everyone. And I think that that's a mistake too. That Roger Ebert said that movies made for everybody are movies that are made for nobody in particular. There has to be a particular audience. You have to understand what they want. You also have to understand what you want. And there is a balancing act between the two. You have to be able to create something that reaches an audience, it speaks to them, but you also have to stick to your guns when push comes to shove. And sometimes it's the reverse order. You have an anchor, and the fandom will push you to one way or to the other. And sometimes the fandom is pushing you some way, and then you put the anchor down. Whatever it is, there needs to be a certain dialogue. It's the problem with most remakes. Every remake is created because there is a fandom out there, because you want to reach those people, because that it's an automatic success because you have that group of people. But the other side of the coin is that if it strays too far from that, then you lose the purpose of even doing that in the first place. And you'll see this, with the really bad remakes that in film and in television, where, and I won't name names, but you'll see that it's just, well, why did you remake this? If you're just going to completely deviate, or the opposite way around, if you're just going to retell the same story over again, well, what was the point? There has to be a give and take, and that's where artistry comes in. There has to be an understanding of, not just classical structure and craftsmanship and artisanship, but the actual art. And that's where experience comes in, where you begin to learn where your heart is and what you really need to say, but also begin to realize that there needs to be communication back and forth.
All right. And no, I believe in that because I see it all too much. Like I said, I know examples. Like you said, you didn't want to name names, but I like it. Like I know what you mean exactly because it's getting very, I guess, I wouldn't say ham-handed, but like it seems to be like it's just juggling about. I see ever so more slightly these days, or at least due to the influx of the popularity known as social media. But I digress. I want to actually ask you though, what specifically led to you working with your like Starlight Runner Entertainment job? Like how did you get there? Like where did you said were with Showtime, and then what actually led to, I guess, connecting the dots between working at Showtime to working with Starlight Runner?
So I went to NYU, and I really wanted to get into television writing, specifically animated television writing. I'd worked a lot. Eventually, I was able to write a script for Ninja Turtles, still developing things to this day. I've got to work on lots of programs, and they were all fantastic. I love where I am now. But the transition was, I got the Showtime and I wanted to get into creative, but I didn't want to move to LA. I knew that. And the reason I knew that was because I had so many colleagues who moved out to LA immediately upon graduation, or immediately, just like when they were too young. And what I found was, almost to a T, those people wound up getting either ground into the system, or they just completely burned out, because there are just too many people who have scripts and stories, and it's a rat race. And what I saw were that the people who succeeded, it wasn't necessarily in New York. It was, they went someplace and they made a name for themselves within a certain frame of art. And that allowed them to be able to take the next step. And so I wanted to stay in New York, and Showtime offered me a position, and I hoped to move from the production side, which is where I got the position, to the creative side. But I was wound up being stuck in quality assurance in QA for a platform that was being developed, and it was great. My colleagues were great. My leadership was great. Unfortunately, it was being developed right before the 2008 recession, so that hit, and almost everybody got laid off. But in that QA position, what I learned was a rigor in data analysis. I was being given lots of data, and I was being told to interpret that data from the user base, from from people who were QA testing like me. There were quite a few of us there, people who are now in much higher positions, Mike Drucker, not the least of which, and Ed Douglas, not Ed Douglas, sorry, that's someone else. I won't name that person's name. Ed Douglas is a great writer. He and I have worked on other things. But what that did was that it gave me a grounding and understanding the business side of things, understanding demographics, understanding who to reach, understanding um, understanding what the relationship was between the art and marketing and branding and outreach. It also gave me a grounding in video game design, which I'd always loved. I was working on software at that point, which allowed me to be able to speak to that part of the business. So when an opportunity arose, I had a colleague at Starlight Runner Entertainment, and she reached out to me and said there was a writing gig, and it asked if I was interested in doing a writing gig for this particular story world design. And I had nothing to do at that point. I'd just been laid off, so I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that." And I jumped into that. And um, I will say that my writing was good, but the bigger thing for them was that I hit my deadlines and that I was able to understand the data that they were showing me. So I wasn't just BSing them. I was able to provide them content early so that if they needed to rewrite, they could rewrite it, but also that I was able to speak the language of software, which is a huge part of transmedia. It's not not every piece of transmedia has some kind of digital aspect, but it is such a huge part of it that it's great to have that. It doesn't mean you need to understand programming, but you do need to be able to look at data and draw conclusions from that and make arguments based on that conclusion. And so that was my entryway into it. And so it was a project that I can't speak about, but the next project was Halo. And that was where I was able to bring all of those things together. I was able to look at the data, look at the narrative, speak to both. I understood software, and that's really where things catapulted. It was the right place at the right time. But it also, I built up that experience. Luck is experience and opportunity meeting at the same moment.
All right. Now, if you're wondering if I look a little bit confused, it's just me trying to absorb all this information because for me, I don't know as much as I should know for wanting to be a writer myself. So, like, just hearing all this, I'm like, all right, you got to take all this in because you did not get that far. So I'm just like, wow.
You know what? I'll say this. Everybody's looking for the way into writing, is looking in for the way in. And the first thing I will say, which I wish I'd learned earlier, was that first of all, you can make your own way in. So many of my colleagues who've made it have just been like, look, I'm going to take a hammer, I'm going to start whacking, and I'm going to try and find my way through this cabin. But the other thing is passion really drives people. If you have a story that needs to be told, I guarantee you there's someone else who wants to hear that story. And that will get you through the hard times. The number one problem I see with young screenwriters in particular is they're trying to chase Hollywood trends. And it's a fool's game. And the number one reason is that if you write the perfect screenplay today for the market today, it's not going to, even if you sell it tomorrow, it's not going to get made for 2 or 3 years. And the market's already passed you by. So that should be good enough. But the second reason is that if you've got, we've all had day jobs, and there will be times when you get back after a 12-hour day and you're just sick. But if you've got something that pushes you, you have a story to tell, that's going to push you to create. And that's the story that I want to see. I'd so much rather hear from a voice that it has a desperate story that needs to get out, rather than someone who's like, oh, you know what, superheroes are hot right now, so I'm going to write a superhero screenplay. And then I read those, and they're all garbage. I'd much rather read or see something from someone who's trying.
Yeah, I literally get that feeling because right now I've been reinvigorated to go back to a project I've been working on, and I've showed some of my friends like some of its original. I guess you would, as we call it, we call my, I guess you would say, my notebook or my draft where it all was written down or where I've been changing it. They've called it the series Bible, and every time we go back to it for my notes for when I'm writing drafts or ideas for like maybe a character or maybe like figuring out where I'm going to connect A to Z to get to the from the start to the finish. my friends look at it and they go, I want to see this somehow produced. I don't care what you got to do. They're like, you got to finish this. You got to submit it to somebody, and you got to get it done. So what you're explaining is exactly what I've been feeling for like the last few months, and I wholeheartedly agree. Is that I see a lot of people that I've talked to that are screenwriters or people that are writing. They're always writing with, I guess, like you say, a trend, or like another thing I've been seeing is everyone's trying to make their magnum opus expecting it'll be made immediately as soon as it's finished, rather than just build up towards it, and maybe someone will pick it up and you'll continue as you're producing it, like one of those things where it's like you might not be fully finished, but with the extra money and the team behind you, if someone goes, yo, I want to start beginning production and break it down into seasons or something, like say you originally have a movie script, but someone goes, this would be better for TV if it was 4 seasons, you can probably get your vision done quicker that way too. There's so many routes.
Or get it done. Carnival Row came across Starlight Runner's desk over a decade ago, and it was a screenplay, and it got made as a premium television show. It's a good thing to have goals. It's a good thing to want to reach your dreams. And there are times when you have to compromise too much and you lose sight of that. Absolutely. But it's so much better to be flexible. And part of that is having multiple projects at once. Everybody has their dream project. I've got a dream project that I've been working on for a long time, and it still hasn't gotten made. I've got to do a lot of great things, and my career is great. And this one thing hasn't gotten made yet. But what it has done, it has gotten me introductions. It has gotten me networking opportunities. If you're a young creator, if you're listening to this, create multiple things. Work continuously. What people want to see are people who execute. If you can execute, if you can create product, if you can create stories that inspire, if you can create things that are in your own voice, that is so much more valuable to a producer, to a production company, to a publisher, to whoever it is, because they'll know that, you know what, this isn't right. This isn't the right thing for us now, but we have another thing, and we know that you can pull that off. So we're going to throw this to you, and that's a job, and that's part of our career. The first half is art, but the second part is putting food on the table. And there are worse fates in the world than making a middle class income and working on art, and not having to worry about, going to the bank in the morning or anything like that. So, continue to hone that, continue to create art and have those multiple projects. That's how I got all of my work too.
Yeah, and speaking of projects, I want to ask, what have been some of your favorite projects to work on, or what are specific properties you've gotten to contribute to?
Yeah. The big one that I always reference is Ninja Turtles, because I grew up loving that show and reading the comic book later on, and getting to work on the early teens Ninja Turtles, getting able to write a script for it, being able to create content for it. That was great. That was like a culmination moment for me, that I had done all this work and gone through this whole thing, and I got to work on a property that I really, really liked. I got to meet really great creators, meet voice actors that I had listened to growing up, not the least of which was Rob Paulson. And I got to, throw a line at him from Mighty Max, which I thought for sure he would think I was super geeky about. And he just immediately came right back to me as Mighty Max in that moment. And it was so cool. And that was great. Another property that I got to work on, Halo was a great one. That was a lot of fun because it was my first experience with AAA gaming. I'd done, much smaller gaming at that point, but to be influential in this gigantic world, that was really cool. And if I had to choose something else, I would have to say probably Men in Black. Men in Black was great because I worked principally on Men in Black 3. And what was great was it was a behind the scenes look at the Hollywood system and all the benefits and drawbacks therein. I actually really wound up liking Men in Black 3. And the people who worked with me on that were amazing, both inside the production and in the transmedia aspect. But it was a $200 million movie, and there were a lot of things happen when you have that much money. And what it taught me was to think on my feet and to not not plan everything perfectly, that there had to be room for adjustment. And everybody involved in that production, from Amy Pascal to Will Smith to Bo Welch and to all these people, they were all had opinions, and everybody wanted to make something done, get done rather, but they all had to compromise too. And that was really interesting, that there could be a bridge between people who had an artistic vision and also people who wanted to make $1 billion. And it was, is Men in Black 3 Citizen Kane? No. But I think that, out of a summer blockbuster sequel, I think it's a pretty darn good movie.
Yeah,
And
I'll agree with you. It's a really good movie. I think the little plot twist ending that seems like a slight retcon was one of the best elements of the film.
yeah, it worked out. And it just shows that just because one has to compromise doesn't mean that one has to compromise. Just because one has to like shift the story or change things and work things out on set, it doesn't mean that one's artistic vision is slighted. Um, it was an amazing production, and it was just really cool, and it hits at the right time for me. It was great, and then I got to work on Spider-Man right after that, which was another dream gig. Didn't have as much influence on that as I would have liked, due to a number of factors that I can't talk about. But
Wait, which
it was still
Spider-Man though?
that's Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and
Okay.
then eventually Far From Home and Venom indirectly, but that I can't
Okay.
really talk about.
Okay. Well, I just want to verify, though you say we can't talk about it. I just want to know which specifically, because I remember at least with Mr. Gomez, I was like trying to at least root it in the timeline when we were talking, so I didn't lose track of where we're going. Because there was a point where he was talking to me about Transformers, and my light, like the light bulb turned on, and I was like, okay, which point in Transformers was he the animated team or was he the Prime team? And that's what I had to do.
If you could pause the recording, I could tell you.
Okay, yeah, I could pause right now so you can tell me off record.
Yeah.
So, on that you didn't get to hear it moment, we can't tell you and we won't tell you. Nuh-uh. You can't hear some of these things. Only I get to. And I'm going to forget these probably, because I'm going to probably take a few shots of tequila afterwards for
For
a pat on my back.
Man.
I know, right? I got to pat myself on the back for this interview. I mean, it's a great interview. So, yeah, no. I like what we've been talking about so far. I like how you're saying about when it comes to compromise, working with properties that you like. I like the fact that you're saying you worked on TMNT, so that means you worked on the first Nick series, not the second one that's currently going
That's
or just
correct.
included. And with that, I think it's about time we talk to the real reason why we brought you here, as I introduced you for. And so, as I discussed with Mr. Gomez, I'm going to be paraphrasing, or what I tried to understand from what he meant by this. When the partnership with Subaru Productions was being made, he was telling me that like it surprised a lot of people within the staff. Some either thought it was a good idea, others were kind of confused. So where did you fall in that group of people, and what were your reactions to the deal as it was ongoing and when it was finalized? So I've heard that like there were a lot of mixed reactions by people in the know.
So I look at every project that comes to us as an opportunity. Some opportunities to me are opportunities to learn from an intense challenge, and some opportunities are challenges where I hope to be able to bring my A game. And Ultraman to me was a little bit of both, because I I grew up knowing Ultraman, but I had never really watched Ultraman when I was a kid. Um, I had watched the descendants of Ultraman. And so when I started researching it, I saw all the influence. I saw Ultra Q in the X Files. I saw Ultraman and Ultra Seven in Power Rangers. It was like this. It was like learning a language that you didn't know that you knew, and so that was interesting to me. But also, it's one of the biggest properties in the world. Not as big in North America as some other big properties, but even though even though I wasn't a huge fan of it, I understood that there were lots of fans of it, and they were very passionate about it, which meant that I had to get it right. This had to be something that I couldn't just, and not that I would say that I ever slacked off about, but if I mess up a marketing campaign for Coca-Cola, someone's going to pick up the slack somewhere. It's a multi-billion dollar, not just multi-billion dollar, like tens, hundreds of billions of dollars, where then, if I get a line wrong somewhere, that's, who cares? Someone's going to pick it up, or, well, it's no big deal. It's a sugar water. If I get something wrong with Ultraman, that's something that people will pick up on, and it's people who actually really, really care about the property. So it was something I didn't know, so it was a challenge, and it was something that I needed to get right, which was intriguing to me. I won't say that I would have actively sought out Ultraman because of that, but when it was put on my desk, it wasn't something that I say we shouldn't do either. It was something that was intriguing to me because of all those aspects, because there was so much history there, and because also the story world was at its core very well designed. There was an ethos there. There was a structure there, and we heard from the people who were in charge that there was an active process to it. But we also found many fans and many people who worked on it who couldn't quite elucidate it. They knew it worked, but they couldn't quite put a finger on why. And that was great, because that meant that it worked. Do we understand how the English language works? No, we just speak it. It's just the way that it works. But you ask a linguist, and they can tell you exactly why the English language works. And that was what was great to me. And the fact that it's an inspiration for so much other content. Regardless of my feelings of any piece of pop culture, if something is huge, it means it speaks to something in humanity, which means that even if I don't understand it, I need to understand it so I can understand how it works. Not to compare Ultraman to Twilight, but Twilight speaks to a very specific audience, and people really, really like that series. I do not personally like Twilight, but I need to understand how Twilight works to be able to be a creator in this field. That's not, just once again, not to compare Ultraman to Twilight, but Ultraman is big enough that I need to understand why it works, regardless of my personal feelings. And those things are always intriguing to me, because it's a way to learn something new. It's almost like discovering a new continent. A 53-year history when it first came to us. And I knew of it. It's the great undiscovered country for me, but it has 100 million people living there. That's just endlessly intriguing to me. It's like finding a new television series, and you find out there's actually 20 seasons to it, or there's a comic book that you read a thing, and actually it's tied to something else, and it goes back, and it's great, because you can dig so deep into it and find so much about it, and you begin to see the threads of it and how it ties to everything else. And it was really, really cool once I began to dig into it.
Yeah, because from talking with Mr. Gomez, I knew that there was going to be times where I'll be interviewing other members, if given that opportunity, which I've been, to ask you guys what's your thoughts on it. And he said, some people may straight up say they don't know anything about this, or some of them will be like, I'm just researching it now, and others will be like, I saw it, I didn't have a lot of the material, hence growing up in America, but now that it's being presented to me, I have no reason to not watch it. So he said, like, you're going to get a lot of mixed reactions, so don't let that scare you too much. So I'm glad that yours is one of the ones in the middle so far, where it's like, I know of it, I don't hate it, but I'm learning about it. And so since you are exploring the franchise, since you are having to investigate what its mythos is or why it's so popular, you've had to watch, I guess, various episodes or various full seasons. Or
over 400
whatnot.
Episodes of the program. So
what's
before this,
Yeah.
The number one program I had to watch in terms of absolute number of episodes was Transformers. I watched a lot of Transformers. And number two was Ninja Turtles. But to be fair, I'd already watched so much of that it was really like I was getting paid to relive my childhood, so it didn't really count. This was number one by far in terms of the amount of content I had to watch. Yeah.
And so the question I was going to ask, do you have any particular seasons or series within the franchise that have stood out to you thus far?
Yeah, Ultraman Ace, I wound up really liking. I wound up liking like the different take. Like it was not that it was like radically different, but it was skew from what was going on at the time. I wound up liking the Ultraman, the anime, a lot because
Yes.
there were a lot of episodes, and I liked that it was a different take on it. It was different from the Land of Light, but it had this kind of weird sensibility to it that I really enjoyed as well. Let's see what else was there. There was I'm actually really liking Ultraman Z. It's not my favorite series, but it's been hitting a lot of the key elements that I've really liked about the show in the past, and that, take this as a barber telling you that you need a haircut, because I'm working on the property right now. But I have actually really enjoyed Ultraman Z a lot. And there have been some, and I really liked Ultra Galaxy Fight and a lot of the crossovers. So there was some cool stuff that came around, but the first one that really hit me was Ultraman Ace. That was something where I got there and I said, okay, I get this now. I can understand. And I will say it was because I'd watched Ultra Q and Ultra 7 and Return of Ultraman at that point. So I was beginning to get involved in the mythos, and there was this kind of like kind of a hook to it that was interesting to me. That was where it began to twist.
Yeah, not to sound like I'm repeating myself, because people who watch these interviews are gonna be like, he's gonna tell every guy that he's interviewing his background. Mine is ironically like I had the TNT syndication, and then
Mm-hmm.
the Tiga Fox box dub.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing was, I already knew of Tiga and the other shows due to like all these fan sites at the time, as the internet was just being like made. And so like for some reason, even though I was already addicted to Tiga before we got the really weird Fox box and dub, I got hooked to not its immediate sequel, but the other one in its trilogy, Gaia.
Yeah,
And
Gaia. Mm-hmm.
so Gaia hooked me, Nexus hooked me when it was first being fan subbed, which means it was illegally subbed, but
Yeah.
and when it came to Showa, it was Ace as well as Taro. For some reason, those two that were not the original or Seven or Q, those were the two that blew me out of the water. Ace, I think I like because it really followed up on Jack's ability to become more of like a henshin hero due to the fact that Jack was given the weapons. So then Ace started doing more flippy dippy, pulling weapons out of his ass kind of stuff. And I think it was also to help compete with obviously the popularity of Kamen Rider at the time from
Yeah,
Toei.
yeah, yeah. That was yeah. It's interesting to see the development of the series at this point, because we can look back and see the evolution, but it's also kind of like, like going back to the Civil War, or going back to like the divergence or of whatever it is, and experiencing at the time, and you can see it now, but at the time, I'm not, people were just trying to tell good stories.
And they
People
were just
people
trying to throw darts at a board to see what worked, to
Yeah,
figure out how do
yeah,
you get ratings.
yeah, and sometimes that works. I can't remember the I wish I remembered the producer's name, but Rockney S. O'Bannon, who worked on Space Above and Beyond and Farscape, he talked about working as a producer on Farscape, and there was a particular episode, the name of which I can't remember, but he said, like, this just episode just didn't come together. And I remember working on a show in the 80s, and I had to give notes to this ultra producer, and it was a terrible show. It was an episode that just didn't work, and I had to be as politic as possible. And 10 or 15 minutes the into the note session, the producer said, "It's terrible, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah, it's not that great." And the producer said, "You make 26 episodes of this a year, and two of them are going to be nominated for Emmys, and two of these are just going to be absolute garbage, and you don't know what they are, because you have to make 26 episodes, and it's the same." They were making 40, 50 episodes a year, and they had a formula for it. There was a formula, and I actually kind of liked the formula. I liked that it was a mystery. That was always something that intrigued me about it, that there was a mystery that had to be solved. It was not just people beating the crap out of each other, which was something that, as a kid watching Power Rangers, it was fine and it was fun, but I wanted a little more out of that. And when I was watching Ultraman, I liked that, these different episodes could take different twists and turns on the same formula. That was something that was interesting. But you're gonna have to throw things at a wall to get making that much content, that much television. That's all what's more impressive about this, that they were able to turn in quality while working at that rate, without reruns and without VHS and without, computer digitized effects and all this stuff, that they were able to do this. It's shocking.
Yeah, it's an incredible feat to do all this stuff, to make miniatures, to make realistic effects, to in a time have to use a blue screen when there wasn't green screen and CG, where you had to actually put a guy on a screen and then hope that your guy can crop out or photo out the
Yeah.
wires or just get the lights right so the clear wires holding it aren't caught too well on
Yeah.
the camera, or that you accidentally don't burn the guy in the suit, which they've done at least 7 or 8 times within the first 3 shows.
Yeah. It happens.
Oh yeah, there's an infamous scene in Tara where Zophie's head just explodes on fire for like an entire 3 seconds, and it became an entire meme that the action figure was given a fire accessory.
I will say on the technical side, the safety precautions, the actual production capability, the things that we've seen behind the scenes have been very impressive. And not to say that I expected anything different, but I worked at the BBC when I was younger, and they had the same mechanisms in place for Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
They have the same, mechanisms in place now with CBS, Star Trek Discovery. These are things that are thought very well out and in safety, and things go wrong on a set that big, but people care, and that's also something that I recommend to young artists, young filmmakers, to think through safety too, because it's very, very important when making something right, that people feel comfortable. When people feel comfortable on a set, fewer things go wrong. Because things will go wrong, but if you're not thinking about it, you're doing it because you trust people. Big things don't go wrong.
All right. And as you stated, for you, I guess the best way to explain it or use the analogy is like this is kind of like jumping in the deep end for you, since you didn't know much about Ultraman. You've said you've had to watch almost every episode that you've pretty much been presented with. So, how did this affect you becoming its current editor in chief of Ultraman Galaxy? Like, what was the process for you becoming its editor in chief? Like, were you the only guy who was like, "I'll do it," or was it like, "You're doing it, bye"? Like, what
Yeah,
was
no,
that whole about?
it wasn't either. It was there was an opportunity that came up, and Jeff Gomez was the initial editor in chief. He was like, we were working on this project. Starlight Runner is working with Subaraya, and we're creating this website. And I'll take the reins at first. But then it was also a kind of it was a football or a rugby ball, and it was something I was already doing, and we were creating, not creating, what we were doing was making sure that the canonical lines from Ultra Q matched up all the way through to the current generation of Ultraman, and seeing what elements were most appropriate and interesting for an audience that was both North American and feverish for more content, but also North American audience that hadn't yet experienced Ultraman. So those elements that we felt and we still feel are the most appropriate are, are I don't want to say outlandish, but surreal science fiction. That the ultra spark, the plasma spark, this land of light, this place that, these beings beyond, imagination, and monsters that are thematic, kaiju that are thematic of humanity's own struggles and excess, and these high philosophical concepts, mixing with, people beating the crap out of each other, and it worked. It worked. So that was something that was interesting to me, that was going on. We were creating this content, and there was this opportunity that came along. And what was interesting to me was that Subaraya was saying, we're making a big push again into the North American markets. This is going to be one of our major focal points, which is Ultraman Galaxy. It's a place where we can put content first. It's a place where we can reach fans. It's a place where licensed content can go, which is very important. It's a place where there can be a dialogue, and we want to make sure that there is at least this kind of one focal point, kind of like there is the plasma spark, like there is this one space where that you can get the right content. And that meant that it was going to be focused. That meant that we would get information directly from Subaraya, information directly from licensors, licensees, information directly from fans, and we could kind of have an effect on the fandom. That was what was intriguing to me. And so so when that came up, that was something that I couldn't turn down. It was offered to me because they knew that I was kind of the perfect world. If I was a complete fan of the series, I would only be in service of the fandom. And if I was not a fan, then I would be trying to push it to those who are not fans of Ultraman. And I think that's a detriment to both. Um, and I've always said that even before Ultraman, that you need someone who is both outside but inside. That's almost an impossible task to take, because if you're too close to the material, then all you care about is not just Ultraman, but is the property. And if you're too far outside, you don't understand things. So that was what was intriguing to me. I was kind of on this knife's edge, and I was hopefully going to be able to give content to fans that they wanted. That was the thing that I wanted to do, to give content to fans that they wanted. I hope I've done that. I hope I've been able to steer the site towards that. It is a site of many masters, but I that's been my ultimate goal. And if people have felt that I've done well, then I'm very grateful. And if people have felt that I could have done better, then I'm sorry, but I have been trying my best. I've been trying to do right by the series and by fans, because that's really what the site is about, bringing non-fans and fans together.
All right. So this is actually a really good question that I began formulating. Now, the reason for this question and the reason why we had to actually discuss it over with Mr. Gomez and all the people above us was actually because, as a person who's been a journalist with Tokusatsu, covering Tokusatsu or just covering media in general, and you have these official websites, obviously for people who may not know, who are just new time fans, Tsuburai's website actually is called M78 in respect to where the Ultramen are from. And I believe they also have a M78 English. And so the question I had for you guys was, why is Ultraman Galaxy called Ultraman Galaxies particularly, and not you guys working on helping the M78 English site? Because I wasn't sure if that was just due to structural licensing, URL, or just Tsuburai wanted a specific type of branding.
Yeah, so Ultraman Galaxy is directly affiliated with Tsuburaya Productions. So I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not if I can say, it's official, but it's not official at the same time, meaning that we are able to push for things, and we are able to release things that Tsuburaya might not necessarily do on their own. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't. It just means that we have the capability of kind of, doing things and releasing official content, but also saying, like, hey, the fans really want this. Could we please do something about this? Could we please release this piece of media? Could we please release this news release, which is only in Japanese? And to their credit, they're like, hey, actually, you've been releasing this, and this has been getting some good buzz. How about you get this good? We've only had this in Japanese now, and we'll give you the direct translation. Could you spiff it up a little bit and make it so that it doesn't just feel like a direct translation, that it's been actually written in English? So it's I would say it's like a sister site to that kind of content. It is official, and obviously we are working on Ultraman directly, but we also have a little more license to kind of push, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because the reason I just thought was because people don't know the context of it being called M78, or people just, that's what I wanted to make sure precisely. I just don't want to make it seem like we'll just call it Ultraman Galaxy, because like most Tokusatsu, like longtime fans just call it the Ultra series rather than the Ultraman franchise. We call it the Ultra series, and I think you guys know that term too. And I just wanted to bring that up also because in the early, I would say the first few weeks or the first few months that Ultraman Galaxy was up, as a journalist, I was able to still sometimes see the news posted on the Japanese site and get it all translated through one of my friends who was a translator before Ultraman Galaxy was up to date. And I think that was just because you guys had just launched. But now you guys are in sync, so like it seems like there's more of a real connection where obviously the guys who run M78, the guys who work specifically for Tsuburaya, the guys who are making sure that you guys get the content and get it in a timely fashion. So when they upload it, you guys upload it, so there's an actual synergy being formed. Because I remember that was one of my criticisms. I said, oh, they'll work this out, they'll fix it by the end of the year, and you guys did. Because I sat there as a guy trying to just cover the news as it's breaking, to be a valid source of
Yeah.
media. And looking at this, going, I'm not a big know-it-all. I'm not a big, real site runner. I'm not a big brand licenser. But as a person starting a business, I was like, this seems like a bad move from an official expansion. But what I'm saying, all those things, all those criticisms that I didn't publicly voice, I just kept to myself. Like talking to you now, you see what I'm saying? Is like, as a fan too, I was going, this will all fix itself in due time, and it obviously is, because here we are talking. And
Yeah, and by the way, criticism is fine, critique is fine. Artists don't grow without
yeah.
critique, honest critique, and fair critique. And yes, particularly they're always growing pains. But and it sucks to hear that as a creator, because you always want your art to be the best. You always want to do well. But if one's being honest with oneself, if I'm being honest with myself, there were things that we could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
But that part of that was also, it was, when we have to have approvals that go up the chain of command, and when we're starting out, those chains of command are a lot more rigid because people don't understand or don't trust necessarily, and that's absolutely fair. You have to build that level of trust. You have to build and make sure that they understand that we're treating their baby with the appropriate respect.
Exactly.
And once that happened, and part of it was growing pains, part of it's just natural, just like trying to get things to fit together.
Mm-hmm.
But also it was a feeling out process. And now, the reverse is true too, that we will work with, Marvel, and we will get stuff that's coming from them, and we'll share it with them, and they have to, I wouldn't say they have to scramble, but they have to react to it too. So now now it's a two-way street where they're giving us stuff, but we're giving them stuff. There's a great collaboration that goes on. Everybody who works on it, there's nobody who works on it who doesn't care about the property. Everybody cares about the property, and that's what makes it work. Because when someone disagrees with you, it's not because they're trying to put their stank on it, or because they are trying to be political about it. They're actually trying to make the property better. They're trying to serve the fans better. And when something goes wrong, it's people are honest about it, because they feel like, hey, we messed up. We need to do something better. And that's so much better. I've been involved with productions with people with huge fandoms, with huge franchises, where it was like, who cares? These fans, whatever. And it's a shame, because it's like these are the people, not just the bread and butter, not just the meat and potatoes, but people who actually care about this kind of thing. And yes, there are people who care too much, but that's not a valid criticism. They're people who actually like your stuff. They're the consumer, and they get to dictate as much as you get to dictate as a creator.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. And as editor in chief, what are day-to-day operations like? Like how busy can it be on an average basis? And what have you found difficult being the editor in chief of Ultraman Galaxy?
Yeah, it's very much like being on the front lines of a war. Long periods of boredom with short periods of absolute terror. And the time difference does not help. There will be times when we will get an email at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there has to be something that goes out, and it has to go through 3 chains on our side and 4 or 5 chains on their side to be able to get it done. And those are rare, but it does happen. And there are other times when it's like, hey, could you look at this, on both sides? Could you look at this article, and what's this? Is this comma in the right place? And you kind of talk it out for 10 minutes, like, okay, it's good, it goes up. So it's a mash. There are times when it's the easiest thing in the world, and there are also times when you have 3 different products launching within a week, and you have a new episode going out, and there are 2 press releases that need to get edited, and there are 4 articles that are on hold in some capacity, and you have to coordinate every single piece and make sure that everybody's happy. And that's the goal, that the production companies are happy, that the creatives are happy, that the fans are happy. And so it's being able to make sure that everybody gets what they want at that particular time. And it's and in that part, it's great, because it might be a struggle in the moment, but it's also kind of like working out. Nobody actually likes working out. No one likes lifting weights or going to the gym. People like after the fact. And that's what it is. Once everything comes into place and an article launches and you get a piece of fan mail and people are like, oh my God, this is happening. That's all great. In the moment, it sometimes is a little rough. But there's always the feeling that once you get out of it, if you've done your job right, if you've done the best that you can, that people will like what you've done.
Yeah, you literally summed up everything about like the fan base just trying to do the work when there's no translations available. Because like you said it so perfectly, there'll be times where you're just, man, this is great, nothing's happening, and then Subaraya or Toei, this is way before Ultraman Galaxy existed, goes, here's the press release of a press conference we didn't really well promote that well on the media or on the internet, so you guys could actually plan out in advance. So your translators are asleep, and now you're forced to do translations through Google Translate and do the little bit of Japanese that you know by yourself, and hope to God you're effing right and you get it in a timely fashion.
Yeah, it's just and what has been great for me working in this industry is seeing behind the curtain and realizing everybody's winging it.
Mm-hmm.
There is no person out there who has it all and understands everything. Everybody's trying to do their best, but I found way fewer people who were malicious than I expected. I feel that most people are actually trying to do what they can, but I will also say, and this is not about Super Eye. There is another property that I worked on where they had a property and they had a few creatives and they made some products and it was very well received by fans. And then the studio was like, okay, that was great, but now we're going to take it in a completely different direction. And people were like, well, why? Why go in a different direction? If you have a reason, tell us why. And they were like, well, it's old. Now we got to do something new. And there was no rhyme or reason to it. Whereas I've always felt with Super Iowa, I've always felt with the licensing group, where I've always felt with the people who were involved in this property, they had reasons and they were able to explain them for it. Sometimes things get messy, but I always felt that people genuinely believed in the property, genuinely believed in the story that was being told.
All right. So you mentioned about things that you could have done better or things you're working towards improving. So are there any things currently that we can sort of talk about regarding the site's contents or presentation slash theme that you want to publicly talk about that you want to improve on?
Yeah, so the first big thing is that I will be stepping down as editor-in-chief of Ultraman Galaxy. It was a great ride, and it was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of great stuff that came about. But I will be taking on other roles within Starlight Runner and within Ultraman Galaxy, sorry, the Ultraman property in general. One of the things I can talk about is that because of our close collaboration with Marvel, I will be producing and editing a series of short Easter egg videos based on the comic book, so that fans and non-fans will be able to see the references to the classic series, and not just Ultraman, but Ultra 7 and Ultraman Ace, which I'm excited about, and Ultra Q, which is also great. We'll be able to have references, and super fans will see these when they read it. But those who are more than casual fans might pick up a couple things, and that's been exciting for me because I've begun to be able to speak the language in a way, and so I'll be able to kind of cross cut and showcase some stuff. And the first episode of that should be coming out within the next week or so. So be on the lookout for that through Marvel, through Subaraya as well. It's being done in English, so you don't have to wait for a translation. The translation will go the other way for that. So that's going to be very exciting. And the other thing is that Ultraman Galaxy is really the kind of just the foundational point, the focal point of more content for North American Ultraman content. That there will be more stuff, and not just Netflix Ultraman, which is great, but more things that are coming down the pipeline. This is not something that this is a feeler for. Let's see who's interested in this, and maybe we'll throw a couple bucks here and there. This is a concerted effort to produce more content directly aimed at the North American market. So understand that the first phase is to win Ultraman fans over. And the second phase is to make sure that as we are pushing new content out, that it meets with their approval and can reach a wider fan base, which will mean bigger budgets, which will mean more content down the road.
Now, as for those Easter egg videos, I've been sitting on that secret for since my interview with Mr. Gomez. Like, I don't know if he told you that I knew about that, but I've known since
He
the
hasn't.
last one.
I literally got approval at 4
Okay.
p.m. today.
Okay,
I
so
was
he
like,
he literally
yeah,
like, yo, you could tell. Okay,
yeah.
because I wrote like that's why if you saw me, I had like the hugest grin was because I was like, yo, are they gonna finally let us say it? Are they gonna let us publicly say it? I'm
Mhm.
like, hey, we got it.
Look, and by the way, like the Rise of Ultraman has exceeded everybody's expectations. Everybody had big expectations, and it's done even better than that.
Mm-hmm.
Both issues have gone back to second printings. The fan reaction has been very strong. I think that that speaks to the design of the series in general, that it allows for these for these takes on the series while still remaining in universe. That multiverse rather, not universe, because obviously it's a new Ultraman, but it's a multiverse that is taking place. There's all this stuff that that can be explored. The creators are great, and because it's been going so well, there people have just been clamoring for this kind of content, and so these videos are going to be out there helping bridge the old fandom, the old guard, with the new guard. That's the ultimate goal for these pieces. That people who recognize these things can say, great, and let me show you even more. But also for new fans to be like, huh, so what episode is that particularly? And someone in the comment section can hopefully say, oh, that's Ultraman 7, or oh, that's Ultra Q episode 4, or oh, that language was actually showcased in yada yada yada. So that's the ultimate goal. That it's not a gatekeeping exercise. Gatekeeping can kind of be a dirty word, but what
Oh
would be
yeah,
great,
it
yeah,
is it's oh that's such a divisive word because
it is, but at the same time, if you've got fans who are like, here, let me show you, but let me show you this world of content. That was what was great for me. Working with people who knew the property, they could point me to particular episodes, they could point me to particular moments where it felt real and felt interesting. And I'll give a lot of credit to Mel Creek for the Blu-rays and seeing that content, in that level of definition, and that really sold it for me in a major way. There was just so much great stuff, and the fandom has been overwhelmingly positive with me. I love Ninja Turtles, but it's a very very divisive fandom at points.
oh yeah, I know.
And yeah, and they'll let you know, and I appreciate that too. I do appreciate someone who gives me their honest opinion. Polite but honest opinion. I'd rather know that I'm messing up politely than for someone to be a troll, obviously, but also for someone to be like, well, they'll get it right eventually. I want to do right by fans. I want to do right by the property.
Yeah, I completely understand, especially when it comes to Ultraman, because I've always sat here as one of those guys that sometimes gets labeled as a gatekeeper, but I'm one of those guys of like, if you're coming in, I'm gonna ask, can you guys be polite? Like I always refer to myself as like that librarian assistant dude, where you're at like you're the clerk desk. You're not really the
Yeah,
full
yeah, yeah,
librarian,
yeah.
but you're just there to make sure like it's over there in section A, it's over
Hmm.
here, and then like they like tell you to shove off when you're just asking them, hey, how can I help you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get
That's
that.
how. And then I get called a gatekeeper when I'm like, hey, I don't like you being rude, and that one I'm just going, hey, if you're actually looking for it, it's over here, rather than you just pretending to ask.
Hmm.
That's just me personally.
No, no, no. I get that 100%.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I like hearing that you're going to be working on the Easter egg things, and this is a question that I've personally had because when I went to the universe section, I've gone to it a couple of times, and I was wondering, is there any plans for the site's universe section to become more like the Star Wars databank or a Wikia like structure where you'll actually be able to, in a sense, see almost all the kaiju or know more in depth stuff like heights, measurements, episode debuts, reappearances, other versions? Because that's one of the things I do tend to like about having the various ultra fandoms or wikias is that like it'll show here's Generation One Gomora, the original suit. Here's the Generation Two. Here's the powered Gomora. Like, are you guys thinking on doing that, or do you think it's just too complex for the site even now and its near future.
No, so that is a goal for us, to be a much bigger repository of information. The the struggle for that is that there are wikis out there already that have so much information. So the balance is, how do we give something new for fans that they can't just go up and Google, but at the same time be able to continue to increase our level of information on the website. So you may notice, as we are continuing to go forward, if you look at these entries, that there will be hints as to content that is coming down the road. You will see that enemies and actions and technologies and heroes are being updated, and you may wonder, well, why is that particular hero being updated, or why is that particular villain being updated, or why is this technique being highlighted? It's because there will be elements that are coming down that are focused on that. So it is a bridge between the superfan, who both has all this information and wants even more that you can find on a wiki, and also the casual fan who is liking the content but can't or doesn't want to jump into 70,000 different pages on a particular fan run website. So it is a balancing act, and we want to do more, and we are pushing more. But it has to be a step-by-step process for that to happen. For me, it would gradually grow, not just into a reserve of information, because that's very necessary, and people would like that, but also a place for theme, for people to talk about the content, for people to express their opinions about content in a polite fashion. But there are going to be people who prefer Ultraman 80 to Ultraman Taro, or people who prefer different generations, and to have people be able to discuss why they like that and the themes and the content therein, I think is one of the successes of the show. In the same way that you can have someone who prefers the Tim Burton Batman or the person who likes the Christopher Nolan Batman, or the Frank Miller Batman, or the Brave and the Bold, or the Batman the Animated Series, and you can all have different opinions, and yet at the same time have this kind of repository of information. It's one of the greater failings of franchises in the Western Hemisphere, where a series comes out and it's great, and then it's kind of left to rot, and it's up to the fans to kind of make sure that things stay appreciated, stay resourced and archived. I feel that studios and I feel that creators could do a better job of making sure that that content is out there.
Yeah, because the reason I had come up with just the thought of the depth of where the universe section is going to be is because I slowly noticed that a lot of the at least featured kaiju that were present, I looked mostly in the kaiju section for some odd reason. It was just that one.
Yeah,
but
amazing.
But for me, I was noticing that they were in alphabetical order, which I would think, well, that's a good idea, but I also thought, wouldn't it be better if they were in series chronological? That was just like me thinking of like how I would try to explain it to somebody so they don't start thinking that, this guy was in the first series and vice versa. But it was like, I saw it, and I also noticed that a lot of the featured ones started to match who were on the first page of the featured booklets in the Mill Creek set. So I was like, okay, so is it working on just who are the featured ones that Mill Creek chose to single out, and then does it go by the order of release? Because I was also seeing sort of a pattern, but I wasn't known for sure how your pattern works. I'm not going to ask you to explain all of your mystical secrets, Grandmaster Wizard of this website, Webmaster. But I'm like trying to put the pieces together as, a guy going, okay, this is supposed to bring in the casual audience, but as a longtime fan looking for a site that's trying to become, I guess, like I said, the reason I use the example of Star Wars Databank is you could literally look up the statistics of ships, and it might have most of the elements of like, oh, this ship is made out of this fictional metal. It has this and this weaponry. And then it might say, oh, it was seen in this work of media. But then you go to like the Wikipedia, and it's like every listing there. So it's like what I was trying to say is like, how can I go to this website that it makes me want to go to the Wikia to look more in depth? Like it was because like I always see it as that too, is that you want to have your site good enough where it has a lot of base information that is required, but then makes them intrigued to still visit the fan sites too.
Yeah, it's a perfect. I thank you for bringing up Wikipedia, because that's the perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot build Wikipedia. We do
Yeah.
not have the capability of building out to that level.
Yeah.
We do have the capability of building out to a level where the casual fan has a base information, has enough for a little bit extra, and then where we can talk about things that can then lead them down a path to greater fandom. That is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's what I
You
was
know,
wondering. That's
because
exactly.
yeah, because not everybody is going to be a super fan, and that's fine. I probably watched every episode of the Ninja Turtles from its original television debut up until probably the first season of Rise of the Ninja Turtles. Um, and I'm the outlier of that situation. Most you need super fans to be able to guide conversation and to be able to be there and be your bread and butter, your baseline. But to really succeed, you need another level of fandom, and to be able to build that bridge between the two, so that someone who is a non-fan can become a casual fan, and a person who's a casual fan can become a plus casual fan, and that plus casual fan can become the super fan. That's the goal of a good implementation, because not everybody's going to want to love Ultraman, or is going to want to love Superman or Spider-Man or the Ninja Turtles or whatever. There will be people who are like, this is great. What's for dinner? But there will be people who are really intrigued, and to be able to build that highway for that person, that's the goal, so that people don't have to struggle to go from 0 to 100. That if they want to go that distance, they can, but if they want to get off at exit 67, that's cool too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like that's why I thought to use that analogy of database to Wikipedia, because it's like database still has a lot of information, a lot of really good info. But then if you want the, like I said, the full detail, you go to that Wikia. So that's what I was hoping to see, is like, at least if I want to know all the monsters that are, say, in Ace, I can easily look them up there. But then if I want to know more about said monster, I can just go find a really good fan site. And that's what I was at least trying to, maybe if you guys didn't already have that plan in motion, be like, hey, did you guys think about this one yet? No?
Yeah,
Okay, just
it's
throwing
it's
that one
all
out
been
there.
yeah, it's all
Yeah.
been thinking about. And remember, this website is really a half a year old at this
Mm-hmm.
point. It's slightly, and yes, we want to do more, yes, but we're
Exactly.
we're getting there. We're
Yeah.
building there. That
Yeah.
there are goals in place. Absolutely.
Exactly. And since you were talking about like trying to have a more interactive fan base, or ways to interact with the fan base, or the fan base to interact with you or each other, what are, I guess, some current plans at this time then for there to be either an interactive with the site interacting directly with fans, or fans being able to interact with Ultraman Galaxy?
So we have a contact page on Ultraman Galaxy, and we ask people to submit ideas, to talk to us. If they ask us a question, the answer might be no. We can't do that. There are rights issues. There are things we can't talk about. There are things we can't look at. If you send us an Ultraman script, we legally can't open that script. We just can't do it. But if but you should. What I never liked as a kid was when I just get form letters from Nickelodeon or from Scholastic or from these various areas. We'll be there and we'll read your email. We won't necessarily be able to act on it, but what we want to know, if 10,000 people ask us the same question and we can't answer it, that's going to behoove us to try and push in a certain direction, because that's where the fandom is. We might not be able to answer it. We might not be able to say anything more than, hey, we're contractually obligated to refrain from answering that question. But if people are interested in something and they want to reach out, you never know. You might catch us on a day where we have the capability of answering that question. I mean that legally. Like we are in a meeting with a bunch of people, and we can say, hey, someone was asking about this. Can we release this information? The answer might be no. We can't move mountains, but um, we do want to hear what fans are saying. We do want to hear what people are doing. I think that, and I also think that fans creating their own work. There's definitely a place for fan fiction. I'm a huge supporter of fan fiction. I'm a huge supporter of people building out wikis and building out the world. We absolutely need that. But I also think that people who like Ultraman, people who want to work on Ultraman, they should work on their own things as well. And they should, and if they like that style, you know, you wind up with something like Kaiju Max. You wind up with something like Power Rangers. You wind up with something that is, based off of that, but also shifts the conversation a little bit. And if it hits, then that's a sign that, there's something in the zeitgeist that needs to be addressed. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out to us on LinkedIn, on the website, on Twitter, at Words of Steele, WORDS OFSTEELE, asking us questions. I read everything, and I try to answer everything that I can. Sometimes things slip through the cracks, and if that's happened to you, I'm very sorry. But if people want to get more active, also, think of the other things, cosplay, and watch the new season of Netflix, and Ultra Galaxy Fight. The next Ultra Galaxy Fight is coming at the end of November. Watch that stuff and comment and tell us what you like and tell us what you don't like. And be polite about it, but tell us what you don't like. Both things. Because if you like something, no one ever tells City Hall, "Oh, hey, you picked up my garbage. Thank you very much." If all we hear are negative comments, then we think that, well, we got to change things. But if you like something and you tell us that, and we hear 10,000 voices saying, "Oh, that was great," you're going to get more of that content, because that's what you want. So tell us, in both ways, and don't shy away from it.
All right. So I asked this question to Mr. Gomez, and I'd like to hear your take. But what are things about the Ultra series you look forward to exploring? Like, what particular elements or characters do you see yourself wanting to expand upon if you get to write or do stuff with, obviously, the property in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so personally, Ace, obviously, because he's an interesting character to me. But something that's always interested me about Ultraman is that it's an optimistic utopian view of science fiction, very similar to Star Trek in a sense. That it has this hope for a better tomorrow, and that humanity at its core is better than what we think it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's without evil. It means that our goodness will overcome. And particularly at this time when there's so much anxiety and so many people who are worried about tomorrow, I think that's a very valuable way of looking at story, a very valuable way of looking at us. And those are the kind of stories that interest me. I write dark stories. I'm writing a Lovecraftian YA comic book right now. I like darkness. I like amoral characters. I don't need a story to be uplifting for me to enjoy it. But one of the things that intrigues me about Ultraman is that there is this sense that even in darkness, there will be a better tomorrow, that people are struggling because they believe in something. Those are the themes that I would like to work on. The characters who speak to that the most, seeing the struggle with Belial, seeing the arc with Zero, seeing these characters that deal with darkness and struggle with it, and sometimes they fail, and that's interesting too, to see the foibles of these stand-ins for humanity, and to see the foibles of humanity itself. Those are the things I would like to explore. I don't want to see, fan service is great, and every once in a while it's great to have a moment of levity. But I do like to see complex storytelling, and I think that there is a lot of room in Ultraman for that. Not just there's a lot of room. There's been a lot of experience with that in Ultraman. That those are the kind of stories that I would like to see more of and work more on.
All right. This is just a weird side note. Since you mentioned you're working on a Lovecraftian comic book, have you? And I brought it up earlier. Have you actually watched any of Ultraman Tiga, Dyna, Gaia, and/or Nexus to have seen any of Chiaki Konaka's Lovecraftian splices into the Ultra universe?
Yeah,
Yet?
I have noticed that, but and throughout the series, Lucasite, and these various other, these otherworldly horrors that come about, and and I do like some of that stuff. I don't think it's personal. This is my personal, not Starlight Runner, not
Mm-hmm.
Subaraya opinion. I don't think it always works, and I won't say where it does work, and won't say where it doesn't work.
You can always tell me off record.
Yeah, off record. But I do think that the unknowable is a potent thing to work with, because so much of Ultraman is the knowable. These ultras, these denizens of the land of light were very human-like at one point, and they became something else. And that kind of realm beyond, the unknowable and the unknowable horror are things that human beings deal with from birth until death. It's a part of mortality. That we grow up and we are protected, or we somewhat are protected, and we see the world a certain way, and then we realize the world is not, and there are all these unknowable things out there. But we think, oh, we're going to grow up and we're going to be able to solve these problems. We're going to know things. And then that moment of terror when you become an adult, and you become an adult because you realize, oh, nobody understands these things. And then the next step is, well, just because we don't know something doesn't mean that we can't try and change it. That doesn't mean that we can't try and figure it out. And those kind of elements of horror and wonder in Ultraman really do work, because it does speak to something human in us at all, in all of us. And yes, Ultraman is a series that is aimed at a younger fan base, as is Star Wars, but there is an element of it that speaks to adults as well, because the adults who succeed are those who don't give up that part of their childhood. They don't give up that part of wonder and exploration. And that's something that inspires me about Ultraman as well, that there is not childish, but childlike belief in the goodness of action, that through our actions, we can make changes.
All right. Ironically, our next question we've already discussed, like upcoming Ultraman products that you're directly involved with that we can freely discuss, which are those Easter egg videos. I don't think there's
Secrets
anything
of
else.
the Rise of Ultraman is the official title.
Secrets of the Rise of Ultraman. I think that's all we can officially talk about at this time, obviously.
That is correct, yes.
But I don't think we brought it up yet. Do you know who your successor is for the editor-in-chief spot?
Yes, I do. EJ Kulankundis is a big Ultraman fan. He's written some blogs already. He's worked on a lot of content on the website. Great writer, great researcher, a huge fan of the series. He is going to more than adequately fill my shoes. He is not going to succeed me. He is going to replace me. I have no doubt about this. Guy is great. He is actually writing these episodes. I'm producing and editing him, so I'm overseeing him. But he's bringing stuff to me that we're just like small elements. And I'm like, how'd you figure that out? And he's like, oh, I know what's going on. He is going to be taking over shortly. It's kind of like the handing of the baton right now. But he's been doing great.
All right. Last question. Well, no, this isn't actually the last question, but I would say this is the last question regarding all the Ultraman stuff. The last three are just about you in general. So how aware are you of the current tokusatsu renaissance, as I like to call it, in North America, and what are your opinions on it? If you need me to clarify what the tokusatsu renaissance is, I can, or if you already know, that's better for you.
I am very familiar with it. I am a huge fan of tokusatsu in general. It is a genre that I think, when it is done well, it is really, really fun. I compare it to steampunk, in that when you have a really good steampunk story, it is great, and when you have a really bad steampunk story, it's just because people are looking at the trappings of the genre. I'm currently pitching my own tokusatsu television series. Whether it'll ever get made or not is another question altogether. But I am familiar with what's going on, and I think what's happening is that people are realizing the charm, but also the efficiency of these kinds of programs. That you can do a lot with. People thought for a long time it was just guys in rubber suits beating the tobacco juice out of each other, and it is more than that. And I think that the smart people who are in the genre understand that there is more to it. That they can do more with it, and I'm looking forward to a lot of the things I'm seeing in pre-production, a lot of the things that have already come out. I want to see where these things go. I already mentioned Kaiju Max, which I really like. If you're watching this and you haven't read it yet, a lot of it's free, available for free via Comixology Unlimited. So if you have a Comixology Unlimited account, you can get a lot of that stuff. But also there are a lot of other programs and a lot of other things out there that are, they are the next series, the next wave, the next generation of people, the people who grew up with this, not the people who grew up with it in the 60s and 70s, the people who grew up with it in the 90s and the early aughts. And they have their own opinions because they are influenced by the people who were influenced by the original things. And they have the capability of directing it, making it at a budget that is a quarter of what it once was made for, because, just due to the nature of technology.
All right. So our viewers are probably unaware of this, but you are also a teacher while working at Starlight Runner, if I recall correctly. And could you tell us about how you're able to juggle both these professions?
Yeah, the benefit of Starlight Runner, the benefit of being an artist in general. So the downside of being an artist in general is that there is no strict career. It's not like you have a 9 to 5 job. It's not like you work 50 weeks a year and you have a 401k. But the benefit is that you don't have those things either. The benefit is that I can work at Starlight Runner, that I can teach, that I can write my own comic books, that I can collaborate, that I can consult, that I can do podcasts. I can do all of these things. And I have the flexibility. So I will have weeks where I work 80 hours a week, and there will be weeks where I work 10 or 20 hours a week, depending on the projects, depending upon what's coming in. So for teaching is great because it really forces me to think through the practices that I put out there for profit. I have a duty and a responsibility to my students to be forthright with them, to give them my attention, and to make sure that they are getting the best side of me. So it benefits me as much as it benefits them. And it's for a few hours a week in class, and then their homework assignments, their at-home assignments, which I like to refer to them because homework's a dirty word. Um, and it builds a bridge and it builds a network. And what I wanted more out of my experience at NYU was more of a mentorship program where people would give me pragmatic advice. I really enjoyed my education at NYU. It gave me so many connections and so much education and so much, but I would have valued mentorship a little more. I would have valued the next step a little more. And that's what I want to bring to students, that they don't just get me in class, that they can get me out of class as well. And that there is the next step on. So I can kind of, if I have to give them a tough love, great. But I can also, be there for them if they need a resource, if they can reach out to me. And students have reached out to me too, and I don't rely on that, but I've gotten jobs out of students too. So, once a year, someone will reach out like, hey, I know you really know this property, or hey, we need someone to write this script for us really quick. And they're young and they're inexperienced, so they don't have a lot of money, but I'm like, yeah, sure. It's a weekend of my time and do it. I get good reviews. Everybody's happy. But it is a connection to young people, younger people, because some people are 40 and 50 when they're working in a graduate program. But it is to Starlight Runner's benefit that they allow me to teach, because it allows me to be young, to think young, and to hear where the zeitgeist currently is.
All right. And how much of transmedia storytelling is a part of your seminars?
It really depends. So I do lectures on, so as an example, I do a series of lectures on horror as a commentary on social apparatus, meaning, how horror reflects our world and how horror is used as social commentary in its best case.
So,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. So it's more of a lot of your teachings is metaphoric and thematic, correct? And psychological.
Oh well, I'm saying it's the whole gamut.
Okay.
It's both. I did a lecture in the summer about Hayao Miyazaki and his films, and the bridge and storytelling. I also do a business of screenwriting course, which is very pragmatic. How do you, as a screenwriter, just starting out, how do you craft a portfolio? How do you reach out to agents? How do you position yourself at festivals? And then also, I do teach transmedia, writing transmedia, producing transmedia, storytelling across media, all of these different formats. So it's really all over the map.
Right.
What I try to do is create a love of narrative in all of my students, so that if they just want to be screenwriters, great, cool, awesome. They just want to be cinema studies people. They just want to study cinema and have a better appreciation, also great. If they want to take the lessons that they've learned in fashion, or the lessons that they've learned in architecture, or the lessons that they've learned in social media and translate it to a different form, that's really fulfilling for me. That they can understand that their narrative background in that particular field, because everything is narrative, it can help them get a job, have a career, have a fulfilling life, tell the story that they need to tell, regardless of the platform where they want to go. That's what's fulfilling about it.
Okay, yeah, sorry if I had to cut you off, or if
No.
I guess I should say, jackknifed your explanation. I was trying to like verify or like what, because like, you know, a teacher can teach anything, or what do they specify in? So I just wanted to know, do you just teach screenwriting, or do you teach because I had like this one professor that, even though he was a writing teacher, even though he was his only course, it was his only course he was paid for, and he'd only teach it twice a week, you know, 2 different times a day, and it was literally just him like doing I guess you would say like a thematic breakdown of like how you were explaining the psychology of how does this reflect to reality, or what is it a metaphor to. So I was wondering, like, are you a specifics lecturer? But you're saying you pretty much do everything.
Do everything. It's
required.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's whatever the university. I teach at the New School. I teach at the Fierstein Graduate School of Cinema. I have lectured in Florida at a couple universities. I have lectured at Macaulay. I have lectured at City Tech. I've done a lot of different places, you know, and I do individualized coaching and consulting as well. If people are interested in showcasing to me their work and getting it workshopped, you get it for free if you're willing to have it showcased on my podcast, which is Building a Better Story World. You can find it at babsw.buzzsprout.com, or if you search it on their favorite podcatcher. If you can't find it on Stitcher, that's a little hard one. Just search my last name. It's Filipek, Filip as in Peter, EK. You can find it there. You'll get free consultation as long as you're willing to have it read aloud on air, which some people are not. They're like, I don't want my work out there. But you get a professional looking at your work. So do consider that. And you can find me, as I said, on my Twitter handle, Words of Steele, WORDSOFSTEELE, if you want that kind of stuff. But it's all over the map. I've worked in film. I've worked in television. I've worked in comic books. I've worked in comedy. I've worked in audio. I've worked in children's literature. I've worked in many, many different media. So there are many different ways that I have taught, and many different ways in which I want to learn from you.
All right, that's great to hear. That's good advice. I'm saying this on air so I don't forget afterwards when we're just saying our goodbyes. But I will need you to make sure everything you said. Could you write that down for me later so I can actually put that in the description?
Yeah.
No, that was a good one.
If you don't get it, you cut out.
Good. No, I love those deadpan immediate reactions. I love it when I know it's sarcastic. No, okay, because I just want to make sure I can just copy paste. Be like, all right, here's all of his legal, or here's all of his ways to follow him. You hear it now, so even I don't forget. My fans can say, hey, he forgot it. But
nope, you get it.
All right, and I guess since you did most of your plugging, I don't think that's anything else you have for plugging, right? You don't have any other. Okay, so my true last question is your last true opinions or insights or advice that you can give to not just tokusatsu fans but content creators on to obtain the similar success that you've done. You've given us a lot of advice, a lot of insight throughout this. I crap you not, you've done a lot of actually insightful things that you've said.
Thank you.
I'm not just pumping you up because I have to pump you up. I'm like, no, as a content creator, I'm like sitting here going, write down notes when you're editing this with your editor. Just be like, all right, boom. So what advice do you got?
Okay, I'll give you 3 pieces of advice.
Okay.
The first is pragmatic. Learn to type fast. Learn to type over 70 words per minute. And the reason is that if half of what you write is garbage and you write at 70 words per minute, you, in 3 or 4 hours of writing, in the time that you can take, over the course of a weekend, you don't have a lot of time, 2 hours on a Saturday, 2 hours on a Sunday, and you just write for that period of time. If you can write fast and half of it's garbage, that means half of it's good, or at least decent. It means that you are going to be able to do so much better, find so much better work, craft so much better work than someone who is mechanically harder or worried about what's coming out. Don't worry about it being perfect when you put it down. Just write, just compose. Ernest Hemingway said, "Writing is easy. You just sit down at the typewriter and bleed." And that is the case. If you can type fast, if you can get it out there, so much of success I've had is just because I was willing to throw myself into a situation and someone knew that I could write quickly and type quickly and get them what they needed to do. And it wasn't perfect. Uh, no one writes a perfect first draft, but it did allow me to fail quicker. And failing quicker allows you to learn quicker and allows you to find what you're good at quicker. So that's my number one piece of advice. Write fast, because it's a mechanical thing. You can teach yourself that. So much of this art is art. You can't learn it. It is something that you just grow with experience, but you can teach yourself to type fast. The second thing is when you are writing a piece of work, whether it is a comedy or it is science fiction or it is horror, look to what fans want. Look to the areas where people like stuff and aren't getting it. And you probably know those because you're probably a fan yourself. When people say write what you know, what they really mean is that you like this stuff and you know this stuff. So write it because you have a passion for it, because you understand it. It's not that it's not because you know Dutch or that you know the inside of a car. It's that your family is from Friesland and you went there as a child in the summer and you have this experience that you can draw on that no one else knows, and you can give so much, and you know the inside of a car, not because you know what a carburetor looks like, but because your grandfather, your mother, your sister, they understood the engines and they showed it to you, and you have the connection to it. That's what it means to have that kind of passion. So write, yes, write what you know, but follow your passions and look to what fans are saying, because you'll know where those fans are and you'll be able to hear what they're saying. This is something that constantly frustrates me when I see video game companies where they have a hot property and people are just begging for a sequel, and they're like, "Oh no, we're going to do something different." Like, why? You got free money. People are throwing money at you. Give them what they want. Find what audiences want. And find what you're finding lacking in that too. I love Lovecraftian horror, but there are aspects of it that I love more than others, and that's what I want to put in my own comic book. The elements that I like from that, because only you know your voice, and if you know your voice, that makes you unique. Don't try to be anybody else. And I guess the third piece of advice is to really know what your goals are. And I mean that sincerely. If you want to be rich and famous, that's an absolutely fine goal. I won't denigrate it like other people will. If you want to be rich and famous, there's a definite path to that, and there are a lot of sacrifices and a lot of things you have to do that. You have to make those steps. Writing certain things, drawing certain things will not make you rich and famous. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to write Monmouth's fan fiction and that makes you happy, do it. That's your goal, because you want to write for being happy, because it makes you happy. If you want to be a showrunner on television, there is a step-by-step path to that. Know your goals so that you can make choices based on those goals, because there will be times in your life when you are faced with a difficult decision. And if you know what your goal is, you will be able to choose between those two paths, because one of those paths will get you to your goal. If you don't know what your goal is, you won't be able to find your path in life. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be rich. There's nothing wrong with wanting to write the next great American novel. But there are paths to that. Being a Kardashian is not going to allow you to write the next great American novel. And on the opposite side, if you want to be rich and famous, writing this esoteric piece of French new wave cinematic studies, novella, whatever, that's not going to get you anywhere either, because that's not the path to it. You don't have to. You can follow whatever path you want, but know your goals so that you can follow that path. And we could all be so lucky that we could have a middle class income and write or draw or create art. If that's what you want, then do it. Find the path that will make you happy. happiness is worth so much more than wealth. At least from my opinion. And what does wealth mean? It could mean millions of dollars in the bank, or it could mean a wealth of experiences. It could mean learning a language. It could mean, having a white picket fence. Whatever it is, whatever that means for you, whatever happiness means for you, go for that. Don't live someone else's life. Live your own life. We're only on this planet, if we're lucky, 80 years. Don't live anybody else's life.
All right. That's really good advice. All of it. I've enjoyed, honestly, a lot of the advice and then some that you've expounded on me, or not just me, but my audience. I'm just sitting here like, at times I keep forgetting this is an interview because you'd be like, here's what you need to know, and I'm going to tell you how to help you. And I'm like, wow, is this even an interview anymore? Am I going to school? I'm like looking around like, what day is this?
Well, I hope I'm not being too didactic. I wouldn't want to be like, and that's the other thing I want to say. I am not Moses come down from the mountain with 2 tablets written stone. Many, many people disagree with me, and if you're one of those people, I get it. I'm just giving you my opinion on this situation. So do not take everything I say.
Don't take it at face value. But I always like to just I love hearing these stories or these advices from anyone. There's obviously going to be parts where I don't agree with it. Not everything you say I'll fully agree with, but I still love hearing the journey in a sense. I'm one of these guys. When I'm doing my interviews, I love it. I love hearing everything because I've interviewed actors. From America. I've interviewed actors from Japan. So I've interviewed voice actors, and everyone's story is different. And talking to the production side is going to be different from the advice I heard from the actors or the people who become animators. So it's really good to hear. And I hope, honestly, my audience here enjoys what you guys are doing at Starlight Runner, what you're doing with the Ultraman brand in general, and hope they've been able to take something back from that, because there are so many types of super fans and tokusatsu like myself that we have a goal of we want to contribute. We just don't know how. And we have all these ideas, and that's one of these things that I'm hoping some people get from these interviews too, is that maybe we can figure out what we want in life, You never know.
Yep. One last piece of advice before you let me go. Be willful. When you make a choice and it defies expectation, when it defies audience expectation, when it defies convention or classic structure, that's fine. Moonlight. I love Moonlight. Moonlight was one of my favorite movies the year it came out. Far superior to La La Land. That's something I'm willing to say. It doesn't follow every narrative convention. But the creators were willful about the choices they made. They made the choices that they made for a very specific reason. If one does not agree with the 3-act structure, if one does not agree with certain storytelling devices, that's fine. But there has to be a willful choice on the part of the creator, not just because, I don't like it. That doesn't mean anything. Why don't you like it? Why are you defying that choice? If you love something, why do you love that thing? Why do you want to share that with the world? Don't just do it because, yes, your voice is important and you should build it on your voice, but why are you intrigued by your voice? Be willful with the art that you create. That is really what separates artists. People who just kind of fuddle around, they like things and they're just trying to, not mock, but kind of ape things that are there. Okay, you might hit gold every once in a while, but if you're willful, if you're looking underneath the hood and seeing what's there, that's so much more valuable. And you'll learn from your failures based on that too. Okay, off my soapbox.
All right. So, anyways, though, I do thank you, Mr. Filipek, for joining me for this interview. I'm glad we got time to do it. Like I said to my audience, I hope you enjoyed what he's had to say, what we've been able to discuss about the brand, where it's going, and what to expect in the days to come, in the future to come, and so on and so forth about Ultraman. And if you have comments or whatever, hit him up at his socials. We already got them. He's already said them. They'll be in the description below if you already forgot, so you don't have to rewind and have to type it all out while listening to us. I actually spell it out for you. So you can always contact him there. You can contact us through, the comment here on YouTube, through our actual website at hero-club.com, and across social media at Hero Club for Life. I've been Wheelchair21 with Mr. Steele Filipek, and I hope I didn't slander your name at that last second.
You're fine.
And
you're fine.
We'll see you all next time with the next actual Hero Club interview with whoever that may be. So cheers to you.
Cheers.